After the release of Chisa, a sentiment has been going around that Chisa is going to be 3.0's version of Shorekeeper, but I entirely disagree with this sentiment. So I'm going to discuss in today's video why I believe Chisa is not going to be the new Shorekeeper in any way. But before we can discuss the differences and similarities between these two characters, we have to actually establish why these characters are good at what they do. Shorekeeper is the one I'm going to start with because she came out first. Obviously, we all know of Shorekeeper's incredible healing and buffing. She gives 12.5% crit rate, 25 crit damage, and then combine that with the rejuvenating glow set and fallacy, you get an additional 25% attack, as well as 15% damage amplification on her Ultra skill. These are all very good effects even in a vacuum, but combine this with the fact that Shorekeeper has an incredibly fast rotation, usually not even going beyond 5 seconds, and most of the time even being below 4, and you get yourself an incredibly strong support character who is also very universal, because her crit buffs are going to work on every single DPS that currently exists, damage amplification works on literally every character in the entire game, and then the attack buffs work on every character that isn't named Kardathea. Okay, sure, there's characters like Thundah and Yuenwu who do primarily defense-based damage, but let's be real, we're not gonna care about their damage output. So Shorekeeper is a character that has incredibly universal buffs, as well as a short rotation. Where she lacks, however, is in the damage output department. However, I wouldn't expect this character to do much damage because, well, let's be real, she's already doing so much. If she also had a large personal damage profile, it would become just utterly ridiculous. So Shorekeeper is an incredibly universal character that works with every character in the entire game, and that's why she's so powerful. So what about Chisa? What does she do? Well, she's a bit newer, so I'm gonna take a bit more time on this one. She's able to apply Unseen Snare on enemies in various ways, but almost all of these require her to be on the field. I'm not sure about the locking on one because I haven't tested this, but yeah, almost every single way to apply Unseen Snare requires Chisa to be on the field. When enemies are inflicted with Unseen Snare, Chisa will apply a stack of Havoc Bane whenever you deal damage to them, up to once every 2 seconds. This is on its own already a supportive effect because Havoc Bane reduces the defense of enemies by 2% per stack. It has a maximum stack count of 3, and Chisa will double this with her Ultra skill, which means that we get a total of 12% defense shred. This is different from defense ignore, but it is going to be almost the same in calculations, just a little bit worse than ignore. Aside from that, she doesn't really have any supportive benefits that aren't her Ultra skill or her signature weapon. She wants to build up her Forte, and then whenever she has maximum Forte, you want to enter her Forte mode, which will do a large amount of Liberation damage, especially if you use your Liberation beforehand, which will upgrade the multipliers of all of her Saw Blade attacks. In fact, they will be more than doubled, so using her Liberation is pretty important. Then her Ultra skill is rather unique. It will increase the cap of every negative status by 3. So all of the currently accessible negative statuses, aka Spectro Frazzle, Arrow Erosion, and Havoc Bane, will be able to benefit from this. And you are mainly going to notice this with Arrow Erosion and Havoc Bane. Spectro Frazzle isn't going to get as much of a benefit out of this. But whenever a character applies negative status or deals negative status damage, they will gain the Thread of Bane effect, which will allow them to ignore 18% of the defense on enemies that are currently affected by Unseen Snare. And as I said before, most of the ways to proc Unseen Snare are from Chisa's own field time, which means that if you're in a multi-wave situation like Whimpering Wastes, have fun. So even in tower floors, but especially in Whimpering Wastes, Chisa just isn't going to be a good character, which is extremely questionable if you ask me. I feel like Kuro should have just predicted this, but whatever, it's fine. But do you see the other issue here? You have to inflict a negative status, or you have to deal negative status damage. Now you could say, oh, Chisa's inflicting negative status, so she can proc the Ultra skill for the team. That's not how it works. It has to be the character themselves who does either of these things to actually get the Thread of Bane effect. So if your DPS doesn't apply any negative status, well, there you have it. They're already not going to be good with Chisa. So this means that Chisa automatically cannot be nearly as universal as Shorekeeper is. So saying that she is going to be the next Shorekeeper is just a very weird statement, because this would imply that every single future character is going to have access to negative status. And, well, let's be completely real here, this is not happening. I don't care how much I would love for negative statuses to get more characters, it's not gonna be everyone. It never is and never will be. So Chisa can never have the sheer flexibility that Shorekeeper has. Now, I've seen a lot of people say that Chisa is simply going to get more teammates in the future. This I agree with, because Chisa is in fact in a way universal. It's just that she's universal to all negative status teams, as long as they actually apply negative status. A big part of why Zani isn't really a good teammate for Chisa is because Zani's Heliacal Embers do not count as a negative status, which means she is unable to take advantage of Chisa's signature weapon. So will Chisa get new teammates? Yes, I absolutely do believe that she's going to get new teammates, and she's probably going to be the best in slot for every other negative status as soon as they get their DPS. But here's the issue. What is stopping Kuro Games from just making a specialized healer for each negative status? This has been a thing that Kuro has been doing more and more, trying to make teams not use the universal character. We've seen it with Lupa and Brandt making Changli Monofusion a thing, we've seen it with the Filova team getting Choyuan and Brocha to fill in the third slot, and then using Cantarella as the healer. Overall, I think that Kuro is trying to limit how universal a character can be. So sure, when the Electro Flare DPS first comes out, Chisa might be their best in slot, but there is a very good chance there will be a replacement for Chisa not long after. Think of Chisa like Ishmael in PGR. Ishmael is also a universal support that works with every element except physical, but she's only best in slot within the Nihil composition, because she does Nihil damage and not whatever element she's supporting. I'm predicting Chisa is going to go into a very similar way. She's not going to be best in slot for any teams except for Havoc Bane, but she is going to work in every single negative status team. This is starkly contrasted to Shorekeeper, who is best in slot with most DPSs in the game, and even the ones where she isn't the best in slot, she's at least second or third. And this applies to every team, whereas Chisa is always going to be limited by the negative status archetype. She was designed to work in one specific archetype and isn't gonna go anywhere else because she simply doesn't do anything for other teams. And even if we completely ignored that fact, and Chisa still ended up being the best in slot for every single negative status, I still wouldn't argue that she's as good as Shorekeeper, because, yet again, Shorekeeper just works everywhere. Shorekeeper is always going to be good in every team. Shorekeeper is going to be good with the hyper carries and the negative status characters. And that's what sets her apart from Chisa. She is not in any way limiting any of her buffs. She can just be used literally all the time. I even believe that Shorekeeper is going to end up aging better than Chisa, for one specific reason that I actually mentioned near the start of the video. Shorekeeper's personal damage is not the reason you use her, whereas for Chisa it is a very large part of what she's doing in the team. And Chisa has a longer rotation time to match this personal damage. So that means that whenever the damage of a DPS goes up, Shorekeeper is going to scale higher, because her entire purpose is about buffing. Chisa made her rotation longer and sacrificed some of her buffing power in order to get more personal damage. But personal damage simply will not scale as well into the future compared to raw buffing. Because we have to remember, at the end of the day, the purpose of these characters is to support other characters. Doing damage is merely a bonus, but if your buffs are less strong, you're simply going to have a lot less longevity. But that's just my opinion on the Shorekeeper versus Chisa debate. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Additionally, if you have any questions, be sure to check out my Discord server, which is linked in the description below. If you just want to see more of me, you can check out my second channel, which is also linked down below. But that'll be all from me. Peace.